What does crashing mean to me? What a huge question. Anytime that you hit a wall, metaphoric or otherwise, there's damage. Those are the moments when I grew the most, when I understood myself the most profoundly. I needed that crash. I needed to hit that wall in some way. Motorcycles came into my life by accident. I was working at Black Hills Harley-Davidson, so they were sort of in my life by default. And my first exposure to bikes was when the parts or the service department guys would invite me to lunch or something and take me for a ride. And the first time I swung my leg over one of those saddles and sat on the bike and experienced the whole thing, I loved it immediately. At the time, I don't think I could even pinpoint why exactly. I just did. There was just something really beautiful about it. My name is Jackie. I'm 40 years old. I'm a writer and author. I have had sort of a penchant for adrenaline-boosting experiences all of my adult life. And it perhaps grows the older I get, which is awkward, given that my body's going the other way. But I was really a loner as a kid. I had friends, of course, but my favorite place in the world was reading in the square of sunshine on the carpet. I just wasn't particularly social. I would just rather read. I am the oldest of 2 daughters, born to wonderful parents. Home life was really sweet, honestly. It was just beautifully simple. I was raised in a Roman Catholic family, very involved in the church. We had dinner together every night, breakfast together every morning. We were, very stable, sweet family. Skiing was so important to my family, I think because we were all really connected through my father to the mountain itself. My whole family worked there, grandma, grandpa, aunts, uncles, cousins, my sister and I both. So it was sort of part of our identity. That's what we did. That was, just a core part of our lives. Woo! Oh my God. So much fun. Motorcycles were not well regarded in my household as a child, or even as a young adult, in all honesty. It was very perceived as dangerous. I mean, the motorcycles themselves were perceived as dangerous. The culture, additionally, was perceived as dangerous, of course, because, we weren't involved in it, so it was easy to see all of the bad things that went along with motorcycles and bikers in general. Initially, after high school, I went to school in Brookings, South Dakota for not even a year. I got my first apartment, and I got a dog, and I had a rabbit, and it was quite the little zoo. Then I kind of got a wild hair to move to Denver. I lived there for a little while working for venture capitalists, but it was very short-lived. My ex-boyfriend at the time came to visit me in Denver, and I put my notice in at work, and we went on a road trip together along the West Coast for a few weeks. Afterwards, we came back home to Rapid City, South Dakota to kind of settle in. I was about 18 years old. The very first time I rode a motorcycle myself, it was horrifying. I definitely second-guessed my desire for all of it, because there's just a lot to pay attention to. You know, you're very exposed in both the really beautiful way and in the very vulnerable way. The tiniest change in the surface of the road can send you down. It doesn't take much at all, and I was very aware of that. And particularly without a whole lot of experience under my belt, you know, it was scary. The summer of my 18th birthday, I learned I was pregnant. We were too young, deeply ashamed, and wildly unprepared. So we did what we believed was best for the baby. I had been for a little while in one of many phases of kind of unknowing, of directionlessness in my life. When I found out I was pregnant, it was not happy news for me. More because I didn't know if I wanted that. I didn't know if I wanted motherhood, and I certainly wasn't ready for it in any way at that time in my life. The baby's father is an incredible man, and he was just a gem of a human, but we were definitely on different paths by that point. Motherhood had never entered any of my dreams. So when the reality of it came very profoundly into my body, it was jarring. It was jarring. I was standing in the shower one morning and crying, like, I don't know what to do, and I felt so selfish. I chose to give the baby up for adoption because fundamentally I couldn't wrap my head around the other option that I felt like I had at the time. I'm not going to pretend that I didn't think about it. It's a complicated situation no matter the circumstances. I knew in some part of me from the very beginning that that baby was not meant for me. I was a tool that could be used. I was a vehicle in which to bring that life into this world, and a beautiful life it is. But it was not meant for me. My family had the desires that they had for that baby in our collective lives, and so they were not particularly supportive of the decision right off the bat. And I heard them wanting me to have this baby and to bring it into all of our lives in the way that they wanted. But it was almost as though a voice from outside of me said, "It's okay, give him up for adoption." I felt a sense of peace that I hadn't ever before, and I felt like I could stand firmly on that decision going forward, no matter what the people around me said. It was the first time, I think, that I understood that everyone around me would always have an agenda for the decisions that I made in my life, because they would affect them too in some way. But I learned in that experience that I needed to trust myself because the people outside of me wouldn't necessarily have the right answers, and in some cases there is no right answer. So the only thing I could ever do was to very clearly identify what my heart wanted, what my soul wanted, and follow that to the end. The experience of writing in a general sense is beautiful, and one of the many things that many writers love about it is the sensory experience. When you're in a car and you're traveling along, you're very insulated from the outside world. Temperature changes and smell changes and bugs and all of that. And on a bike, you get all of it. When you face the hard stuff like rain or a swarm of beetles or something, you just grin and bear it. You just knuckle down and keep going. I attempted to seize the mantle of adulthood by marrying the most mature man I'd ever known. Or so I thought. What would be my husband, the man that would be my husband, and I dated for like 4 months before we married. I just fell so hard in love with him, and the day after the wedding, things changed. A year after that, things had gone downhill so far that we were back in Rapid City, and we were living on the floor of a friend's house, and he wasn't working, and it wasn't working. And there was a point where he had gone out with friends and came back and was a little violent with me, a little aggressive. And that was the point at which I just decided that it wasn't worth the risk anymore. And so I called my mom, and she came and picked me up from the floor and took me home. My ex-husband never physically hurt me. No, he threatened physical violence, yes. I think that the desire to marry was more about asserting myself as an independent adult than it was anything else. And one of my first attempts to find happiness in the sort of prescription life that I had been led to believe was the way to happiness. You do certain things and then you get happy. And getting married was one of them. The decision to divorce was certainly not taken lightly, and it wasn't easy from an emotional standpoint, but it was a relief. We had done so much damage to each other and to our potential futures and to our finances and other resources that it was almost just like setting down a really heavy load and walking away, and that felt good, as awful as it felt to say that. The changes that happened in my life after the divorce were actually surprisingly beautiful. I was not prepared for how quickly it would shift toward the positive. I had a sense of optimism and self-control, control over my own life and my own choices that I hadn't had in years. As much as there was a sense of embarrassment or failure or something along those lines, there was also sort of like I had been gifted a second chance to try again and to find the happiness that I had been seeking all along in a different way, or with a different person, perhaps. I don't believe in marriage. And that doesn't mean that it's not right for a lot of people or even everybody else. I don't believe in it for myself. The men that have come into my life as partners that I have loved deeply and profoundly and with everything that I am have been wonderful men and have loved me equally. But I grow, I change. I could never promise myself to someone for a future that I can't see yet. And I could never ask someone to do that for me. I won't make a future commitment because it's not something that I can promise. And I would never ask that of someone else. The motorcycle is different. The experience is different. The thrill that I get from that experience is something it's deeper. It's like a soul level experience. And I think that it's because in part it's limitless. You know what I mean? There's a point at which my body can only do so much in any other sport or time or accessibility or whatever. But that bike, it can take me wherever I want to go, as quickly as I want to get there, as aggressively as I want to get there. So there's that element of empowerment, perhaps, and kind of liberation. Couple that with the experience of riding through a turn. So on a bike, you sort of press forward and down on the handlebars as you're going into a turn, and the tighter the turn, the more aggressively you do that. So it becomes very much like a roller coaster, flat, sideways. And I get to control all of that. I get to push as hard as I want. I get to ride the edge of that safety, security, to the degree that I want, to the degree that my heart or mind or whatever can take it at any given moment. And I think that's why I love it so much. It was a tight, partially blind corner, and the lane was crowded. Even for a talented and experienced rider, there was no choice but to turn harder. And ultimately, we went down. My experience did not include a vision of white light or a tunnel or a conversation with God or other people around me or anything like that. I was told later by the woman that found me on the side of the road. She had discovered me on the hillside and sort of worked her body in behind me to prop my head up because I was bleeding very badly and had lost a lot of flesh. And she was looking into my face and stroking my hair and praying. And when she looked up, everything in front of her was just this huge field of gold and flowers and sunlight. And she said that everything around her was white light and the sense of peace that she had never known before. No one will ever really know what happened. In my understanding, what we believe happened was that at the Falling Rock corner, it's an incredibly tight turn. My boyfriend at the time, the driver of the motorcycle, was probably going quite fast because we liked it. It was just the way that we rode. And he was an incredibly skilled and talented rider. However, it's a very tight corner. And as we were coming around that corner, we believed there was a truck in the oncoming lane that probably crowded the center line a little bit because he was probably also going a little too fast. And faced with that prospect, any rider that's well experienced and seasoned, you just push harder. You just try to take the corner even tighter, and you have to throttle up to carry the momentum of the bike forward through the corner. In doing so, he probably caught a rear peg, the peg that would have been my foothold or perhaps his, and launched me off the back of the motorcycle into the side of the truck, which broke every bone on the left side of my body. And then when I hit the ground, the rear tires of the truck ran over my legs, shredding off most of the flesh, and that's what kicked me to the other side of the road, where I was found a little bit later. The first thing I remember after the crash is waking up in the hospital and having no idea where I was or why and just not caring. I found out later I was coming out of a 2-week induced coma. I found out the severity of the situation after I had been transferred out of the ICU and into the traditional part of the hospital. So I'd been in the hospital for a couple of weeks awake by the time that anybody told me what had happened. And they didn't tell me what had happened. So what I know of this is actually coming through what was told to my mother at the time. When I was admitted to the hospital that day in the ICU. I had broken every bone on the left side of my body, punctured both lungs, lacerated liver and spleen, broken clavicle, broken pelvis, pinky toe had been dislocated to the point of coming out of my foot, my ankle was dislocated. I had lost most of the flesh on the bottom half of my left leg, and there were gaping holes on the right side, extensive road rash. I was bleeding out. My mom and my sister and my father had been called to the ER. The doctor came in to speak to them. He sat down and with some reservation said, it doesn't look good, and she has a 50% chance of survival if we amputate both of her legs. She'll never walk again, but she won't survive at all if we don't do that. And my mom, this little 5'2", delicate little woman that she is, gets right up in this 6'2" doctor's face and assertively tells him quite matter-of-factly that he is not going to cut off my legs and he is going to save my life. When the decision was made to attempt to save my legs, the doctor spent like 24 hours straight, I believe, picking gravel out of my wounds with tweezers. And once the rest of my body sort of stabilized, they told us that they left the wounds open, and they do this so that the flesh fills in, kind of. It sort of heals itself to a degree, and if you close it up, that doesn't happen in the same way. So in an effort to let that fill in a bit, they covered the wounds with this sort of gray gauze. It's like a foam that has a hose attached to it. And then there's a little machine that sits beside the bed and sucks the fluid out of the wound to keep it free of infection. But it allows it to be open and breathe enough that the flesh fills in. However, even with that little machine, there is a significant risk of infection. And so to ward that off, there are wound cleanings that have to happen. And these were absolutely the most difficult part, pain-wise. They maxed out my drugs, for sure, before every session. But every other day, nurses would come in with their little cart, and my whole body would seize up because it hurt. I mean, it was hard, even with all of the drugs. So the way that wound care cleaning happens is that they remove the foam and expose the flesh, and they take a very strong soap solution and a wire brush, and they soap you up, and they just scrub really hard the raw flesh. to get down between the muscle fibers and all of that and clean everything really well. And they repeat that several times on both sides and rinse it really well and apply whatever, topical medications they do, and then reaffix the gray foam. I can feel the cold and the pressure and the scratching, and you feel it. My mental state when I left the hospital was relief, for sure. There was genuinely that, I'm going home. I had been waiting, and obviously, for that for a long time. I was in a wheelchair, and there was a walker, and the hope was that I would graduate to a cane at some point. But I had also had this belief, that once I got back to my place and my old life, I would feel better, and I felt worse. It was just this huge, what now? I could walk, but not very well, and I knew I would have a lot of physical therapy, a lot more practice to be able to walk normally again. My left arm still didn't work. There was, such nerve damage there that it just sort of hung limp at my side. But it was more than those physical things. It was just this, why am I here? I don't want to be here. I don't want to do this. I don't even know what I'm supposed to do here. What's the point? And I was just empty. Again. I never contemplated ending my life. I just felt utterly devastated that I had to live. I reached out a lot at that time because I was feeling so sort of just like I was floating in this wide open space, and there was nothing to hold on to, nothing concrete in my body or in my career or anywhere. And I got some really valuable feedback and encouragement from people around me that there must be a reason. There must be a reason that you are here and that you're doing this and that you're living this life. And you don't have to know the reason yet, but it's there. I spent a lot of time writing and sort of journaling about what all of this had meant, why all of this might have happened, what I felt about my life, what I wanted to feel about my life. And that helped clarify a lot for me that I had the power to change, but that I also had to be the one that was going to do the changing. That there was not going to be, some delivery that dropped a path forward on my doorstep. And so I held fiercely as much of the time as I could to the imagination of, walking down the driveway, of getting back on a motorcycle, of going for a bike ride or skiing again, all of the things that I had ever done before. Again, I had two choices. I could either accept the reality of the situation that I was in and be a different kind of person, or I could fight like hell to get back to the way that I was before. Eventually, it came down to a choice. Let fear rule or get back on the bike. It was probably about a year later, actually. I just had to get back on the bike. I'm not going to pretend that it wasn't really scary. The thought that ran through my mind the most for that entire hour and a half or 2 hours or whatever it was, what the hell are you doing? I would come up to every corner just so stiff. I remember looking in my rearview mirror at one point and there's just a line of traffic behind me for a mile or so probably. It was terrifying and also incredibly rewarding when I pulled up to my sister's house and turned the bike off and swung my leg over and stood there. I had come, I had done it, I had gone, the whole route that I had planned, past the place where I'd been in the accident even. That sense of accomplishment and victory over fear was so profound that it kept me going back. But I was not aware at the time how profoundly that would change everything else. Because I knew if I didn't get back on that motorcycle, fear would just sort of slowly start eating away at my confidence and my joy. And there was already little enough of that. I rode that bike after having been hurt that badly by it. I don't have to be afraid of anything now. The choices that I make that make me me, the things that inspire me and spark me and give me passion, I could not let those be taken away by fear. If I had allowed myself to be afraid of that, I would have been afraid of walking down the street or riding a bicycle or anything else. And if I had crashed on a horse, everybody would have told me to get back on. I had to get back on. 3, 2, 1. I would not be here, and certainly I would not be here in this state if it were not for my parents and my sister. Those 3 souls have supported me physically, emotionally, mentally, in every possible way through every phase of every crash and every recovery throughout my entire life. Doctors and nurses, the medical professionals, when I say magic, I mean magic. Those people, the people that happen to be on call that night and take care of me are the people that needed to be doing that job. We would not be the same, them or I, had we not shared that experience together. I decided to begin to sort of journal the experience because there were so many cool stories to tell that had happened kind of along the healing process and in the accident itself. And as I elaborated on the story and filled in the backstory that was necessary to make it all make sense, friends of mine encouraged me to let that be something that would be available to the public. We all felt saved by my stories in some way, just because everybody has their own versions of them. I will write more and more and more about all of the adventures because that's where my true joy lies, is the experiencing and then the telling of the stories. The thing that I hope people get from all of my work is perhaps inspiration, perhaps validation, perhaps that feeling that they somehow now have a license to wildly and weirdly live their own lives and follow their own hearts and souls. My hope for all of us, whether it's from exposure to my work or from something else, is that we connect deeply, fiercely, and authentically with the part of ourselves that is our truest soul self. And I want us all to feel that that's exactly what we should be doing, and not that we're disappointing anyone or breaking any rules following that heart. What does crashing mean to me? What a huge question. I crashed, they were crashes, because I was attempting to live a life that was not what I really wanted. I was attempting to find happiness in life in ways that I had been told people did. I don't believe there is an end to crashing. I don't believe that ever stops happening. However, at this point in my life, I am connected enough with myself, I understand myself well enough, I think, to sort of see those crashes coming. And instead of hitting the wall head on at full speed, I can sort of start redirecting first. That doesn't mean that, the misses or the failures or whatever don't feel that way. Just that I see them differently now as opportunities to change, opportunities for a different adventure. Life is the gift. Being alive is the gift. And so in this following of my wild little heart, the whole thing that I have to focus on, the only real project that I have, is to just love the experience. And all of that is because of what came before.
Number 2.
Okay, so you told us recently you have some news that life has changed for you again. What's happened?
All of my life has changed. My life has changed again. As it appears right now, I will probably be spending most of the year living outside of the US. And this place will be my home in as much as I vacation here to see my family. But that my real life will exist overseas in another country where they don't speak my language. And I'm incredibly excited about the adventure. In the quest to satiate my insatiable desire for adventure, I have run across a man that has allowed me to consider the possibility that maybe there could be a really long, beautiful love in my life.
That sounds quite different than what you told us before. You didn't seem in favor of committing yourself to someone in the long term. Has that changed?
Yeah, my idea of what I am capable of in terms of a relationship has changed dramatically in the last, several months, let's say. Someone has come into my life at this point that makes me want that, or at least makes me want to open to the possibility that there is a person that I could be happy with for a very long time.
So would you say in hindsight there was still an element of fear kind of playing a role in how you lived your life?
Absolutely. There was an element of fear that still ruled my life that I was unable to see or unwilling to look at. I was not afraid of being single. I was not afraid of life on my own for the rest of my life. In fact, I warmly welcomed that reality as the safest, happiest version. But in hindsight, there was at least an element of what turns out to be self-protection. Fear that I would be hurt again, and I didn't want to risk that. I didn't want to crash in that way this time. And now I'm not as afraid as I was before.
So the adventure continues.
The adventure continues. In fact, we've just written the first chapter of the first page of the new book, so there's a lot more. Man, am I taking my motorcycle with me when I move? I don't know is the broad answer. And the reason is because this is very literally a third world country and the roads are terrible. So I am going to buy a dual sport. That's my big plan.